Wonderful. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to introduce our speaker this morning. Caitlin Anderson is the Well-Being and Workplace Environmental Facilitator for Rocky Mountain Laboratories in Hamilton, Montana. And she's here to talk to us about how we navigate conflict in online meeting environments. So, Caitlin, thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
All right, let me open up my screen and get that started. So I think I've shared this every time that I have presented. I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface, being able to give you just a tidbit of information on a really big topic that we could spend all day discussing. We are talking about navigating conflict in online meetings. And so, as Katie's shared, I am the Wellbeing and Workplace Environment Facilitator here in Hamilton, Montana. And it's important to know each other. You may have recognized my name. I was an extension agent at Montana State University from 2006 to 2021. I was here in Ravalli County, which is Hamilton is the county seat for Ravalli County. I started working at the NIH in 2020, and I'm currently a doctoral student also at Kansas State University. I started that last year when I went back to school to get a graduate certificate in conflict resolution, which I just completed in December. It really got me excited to go back and start learning and expanding um, my understanding of adult learning and leadership. Um, and as I shared a few weeks ago, I'm a book lover, so I'll share lots of different books um, in today's presentation. So, how many of you guys have been at meetings where all you see is someone's name? So if I hadn't just shown who I was, what would you get out of this? And you can go ahead and type it into the chat. What would you guess? Sometimes people would say, well, I think Caitlin is probably a female, and that's probably the name that she goes by. Um, you may be able to guess when I start talking that I have a slight Minnesota accent. I grew up in the Midwest for a little bit of my life. I specifically lived in Minnesota, so for when I was from 3 to 8 years old, and so I have a slight little long O when I talk. But unless you turn on your camera, do you really get to know who someone is? And sometimes we feel like we're in a black box with lots of other people that we really don't even know. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like if I don't know the people that I'm working with and I just see them as black boxes, I start to feel like I'm on an island and I'm all alone and I'm cruising the seas and it starts to feel a little bit lonely. And so when conflict starts to arise and this could happen in like people not responding when you ask a question in meetings or I didn't see this until just now, that maybe you're doing the dishes and you're really not engaged to anybody. So this is the beauty of working from home. My daughter just left me a little message. She was trying to get my attention. I apologize. Uh, so it's the beauty of online meetings. I could be talking to my kid if I have my camera off. Um, so what happens though is that it starts to turn into this us versus them. You start to think about this terms of conflict where it's like, oh, their actions did this in a negative way and they must really be out to get me. It can also lead to connection and disconnection. So you can place it in the chat if you'd like to. When you think about connection, what happens in your body? When you think about people you're connected to, how does it feel? How does it show up when you're in meetings? What does it look like when you're connected? I like that. Calm and joy makes you feel smile. You get excited. You might even get that burning in your soul of thinking like, "Ooh, I can't wait to start working on this project." Thinking about the opposite, what does that disconnection feel like? I know I get a little bit of a tightness in my heart when I think about projects that I really don't want to work on or people that I don't really know, and I I start to think about being that island in that boat floating along. So connection, this is a quote from Dr. Brene Brown in her book, Atlas of the Heart. In this book, Atlas of the Heart, she goes through, I believe, 87 different emotions. And she believes that putting words to these emotions and these feelings can help us better describe our situation and be able to share with someone else what's going on in your thoughts. So in connection, she shares that it's the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, and when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from that relationship. Disconnection, on the other hand, though, is often equated with the social rejection, social exclusion, and our social isolation. And these feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathways with feelings of physical pain. And depending on how in tune you may be with that feeling of disconnection, like for me, I feel it right in my heart. That's where I feel that connection with others or that disconnection. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he places this in that third line of the psychological needs that we need for our own well-being. The basics is the psychological, physiological needs, the food, water, warmth, rest, a roof over your head. Next, if you don't have that, you can't move up into the scale of this pyramid. And so right after our basic needs of safety and or physiological needs, those basic ones, is our psychological needs of that esteem feelings and that belongingness and love of those intimate relationships and those friends. And at work or in volunteer organizations or wherever you're meeting with other people in these online meetings, it's we need to have that feeling of belongingness and connection with others. Belonging is a feeling of being happy or comfortable. And I got this one from Cambridge Dictionary. I liked this better than other dictionaries' description of belonging. They say that it's the feeling of being happy or comfortable as being part of a particular group and having a good relationship with the other members of the group because they welcome you and accept you. And Brene Brown shares that belonging is a practice that requires us to be vulnerable and get uncomfortable and learn how to be present with people without sacrificing who we are. So as I shared the last few times that I've presented, this is a model of conflict and analysis. And at the heart of every conflict is a relationship. It could be a friendship, it could be a romantic relationship, it could be a coworker, it could be a teammate. And at the very top of that relationship, though, you have some sort of shared interest. It could be that project. It could be that initiative with a volunteer organization. It could be your roommate to paying the bills or sharing a meal. And in that, though, with that conflict, there is some sort of perceived power. There's a perception of that personality, that positionality that I talked about 2 weeks ago, and also that personal history that you have with that person. And of course, in times of conflict, there is safe saving your face and having that pride of protecting that ego and that respect. And each of these are an important part of that conflict analysis. When we work with other people, we each bring something to the table. We each have different views. toward how we spend our time, how we speak, how we work with other people, how we show respect. I mean, even how we communicate with each other and negotiate. And each one of these can add that another layer into that conflict situation that may be happening. And depending on that relationship that you have with that person, of how much you feel connected to that person, whether it's them following through on your expectations with that accountability on a project, the more that they start to um, deteriorate in that relationship, the further you can get away from each other and see each other into that disconnection of that us versus them thought process. So in work or in meetings where you're working together for a project, there are primarily two different conflict types. One is the relationship and one is the task conflict. So relationship conflict is tension and friction between the two people, and it's usually looked at as personal issues of mutual dislike or personality clashes or annoyances among our team members. And in task conflict, it's the viewpoint related to the team task, where decisions and resources and responsibilities all come into play of who's responsible for what. But what happens though is that often if the task isn't outlined, we start to turn it into the relationship and we start to attach it and attribute their actions because of the person that they are. And it just strengthens that us versus them mentality. And how you can approach this though is through integration, distribution, and also avoidance. So avoidance comes up a lot in online conflict. You just ignore the problem, you just keep your camera off, you just disengage, you start to focus on just what your job is, and you forget about everybody else, and you forget about being part of that team. But this integrative approach is what happens primarily when you have meetings that you're in the same room because you're solving the problem together. You can't pretend or, pretend to be at the meeting with your camera off and really out doing the dishes or out doing something else. You have to be there at that table and it yields successful, satisfactory results to the team members. But in online meetings, it's really easy to get into that avoidance and that disconnection, or start solving the problems through assertion statements of, I need you to do this. And what happens is that sometimes the loudest voice is heard. And so it favors those with the person who's willing to step up and say something. And it doesn't necessarily think about everybody else. So this is an old but good book. I shared an old one last time. This one is The Four Agreements. As I shared, I'm a book lover. This one has been on my shelf. I was gifted that when I first started with Extension years ago. And The Four Agreements talks about just these four kind of codes to live by. One is always be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions and always do your best. This whole philosophy could go into a whole day worth of training. And sometimes when I am in a moment of conflict where I'm frustrated with somebody else, I start to think back of what four agreements am I not holding myself up to? Am I leaning into that making assumptions about somebody else and assuming that they're the problem and my truth is the truth? That's when it's important to ask yourself those questions. Try to communicate. Maybe ask for that meeting where you can meet one-on-one, whether it's in person if you have that ability, or one-on-one in an online setting, where you could work through some of those questions that you have and not make those assumptions. The other is to don't take anything personally. Those are my two targets when I start to question, like, what is happening? Sometimes I start to think like they're doing these things because of me or they're trying to, really get under my skin. And chances are is that I probably haven't communicated a boundary or communicated my needs in that relationship, and I've let it go too far. So, in that understanding yourself and that reflection, ask yourself, how am I showing up at meetings? Am I engaging with others and creating that discussion? Do I adequately prepare? And am I curious about these different perspectives? Oftentimes, when we have meetings, especially it seems like with online meetings, it's like, oh, the clock came on and it's time to join. But if you are going to a physical meeting, what are we doing? We're grabbing our coat, we're grabbing our bag, we're grabbing our notebook. We're starting to transition into that meeting. We're maybe driving our car to that meeting. We're walking toward the meeting. We're thinking about the meeting. And so even though it's an online meeting, I challenge you to maybe take that time and put those buffers between the meetings in your schedule so that you have some time to both prepare for the meeting and also walk away from that meeting with the tasks that you were assigned. Do I stay present and remain present during the meeting? Or are you looking at your phone and responding to those text messages instead? And do I follow through with the expectations in a timely manner? And so the next few slides, I'm going to give you some tools to use in those team meetings. So Brene Brown in the Dare to Lead, she shares something called Paint Done. And um, she helps to mitigate that assumption that we all know what, you know, getting that project done means. She helps clarify the situation by not just assigning, but explaining the reason behind something that's getting done and clarifying how the end product will be used. She provides that color and context by making sure that we talk about the purpose and not just the mechanics. What is this project going to end up doing? What are the impacts that we're hoping to achieve? And finally, we share that reason, the expectations and intentions, the commitment and contributions, as well as that growth and understanding. She goes into using a checklist, and I have two different checklists that you could use. She uses a task approach for that accountability and success checklist. What is the task? Who owns it? The authority. Do I have the authority to be held accountable? Or do we need to rope in another leader or another supervisor to help create that accountability? Do we have the success? Do we have the time, the resources, the clarity? Do we all agree on what this success looks like? And also the checklist of what do we need to happen and when does it need to be done by? That's something that I really like to put into emails. And I also like to receive it rather than saying this, like this needs to be done, send me this information, but send me this information by Friday, close of business, so that we all know when the other person expects to get that information. And then finally, another model is the RACI model. And I only learned about this last year from a coworker. This one's used in project management, and my dogs are now fighting right beside me. It's great working from home some days. R is responsibility, those who are accountable for the correct completion of the task, and at least one person needs to be assigned that responsibility. A is accountable, and it's ultimately just one person is ultimately answerable for the correct and thorough completion of the deliverable task. This person also ensures that the prerequisites of the task are met and who delegates the work. C is who needs to be consulted, and this could be multiple people. And then the final one is who needs to be informed and be kept up to date on this project. And so the other model, the task model, I see it more for smaller groups and one-on-one people. And the RACI model is for like these big projects that need to be completed. And you can look, Wikipedia has quite a few different types of the RACI model, but this one's a model that's newer to me that I hadn't used before. And so here are some of my resources. And the final slide was just thanking you for being here. So I'm going to stop my presentation and we can start answering some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. As always, lots of good resources. A couple just questions about resources. I think the task and the RACI model. Um, do you have those readily available? Is that something we can share? I can obviously follow up on that.
Yes, I can send out both the slide from 2 weeks ago and this
Great.
one. There's a lot of resources that I embedded into this PowerPoint.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, we'll definitely get you those. Any other questions about this one? This one's always seems it's kind of a newer place to think about navigating conflict and difficult situations. Um, please feel free to share anything you're specifically going through. Lindsay, quickly, it takes a few days for us, but we get all of these recordings go up onto YouTube. Um, and there is that link right there as well. This is the third to go series we've done. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the most recent ones, but there's 14 or 15 trainings on there now. Any questions for Caitlin? Maybe as we get started, or wait for folks, I'll get you started with one. I always have
Okay.
questions. um, so this series really focused on yourself, right? Because that's the thing we really can have an impact on. Have you seen any strategies? Do you know of any? I'm thinking especially at where you started with the black screen. I feel like we've been meeting in an online environment long enough now, like some habits have been formed. Some groups maybe are really open and folks are cameras on and video are unmuted and they're engaging. What do we do in that space where that's not the norm? Do you have any ideas or strategies, particularly if we're not the person who's like in the positional facilitator role?
hmm Um, that's where you can model the behavior that you want to show up. You can turn your camera on. You can try to find a good space and also recognize, like my kids got sick this morning, and so I was like, okay, we're punting, and recognize that there's going to be times where you don't show up the way that you want to show up, but try to be as consistent as possible. Model that behavior. And if you're not in the person of power of leadership, like leading those meetings, it could be something that you could go to the person who is accountable for making those and maybe suggesting some expectations and some ground rules. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with New Year's resolutions, but the start of a school year or the start of, anytime there's like this natural transition can be an opportunity to look at the patterns that your committee has created. Like the meeting that you talk about your bylaws at, you got to check out that off every year. Like, okay, are we still meeting our expectations? Um, you might need to you do that manage up technique of talking to your supervisor or that person who's accountable to say, hey, this is something that I think could be really beneficial. Priya Parker is a resource I just remembered. She wrote the book of The Art of Gathering, and it was written before the pandemic. But then after the pandemic, when we were all just trying to come back to space and what does gathering look like again, she shares some techniques of how to be meaningful in the way that you come together, and that could be a way that you use some of those techniques, like maybe it's an invitation that everybody gets sent to their house and says, we're going to be starting anew, or and it kind of can help just break that ice of we know that these are the behaviors we need to change from, and this is how we can move forward.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. As you were talking, it was making me think of the connection disconnection too, right? And
Mhm.
maybe just surfacing, hey, what is important here for us to do this work?
Right,
And do we need to be connected? And if we're not intentionally doing that, then we're
right,
intentionally not. We're intentionally
right,
creating a space that is ripe for disconnection, and
right,
that does not get us anywhere.
right. And the other is that you can also take that lead. If you're seeing that you're feeling more and more on the island, take that time to connect with your colleagues. Hey, Katie, do you want to get together on Friday?
Mm,
If it's a digital, like, hey, let's get together, let's talk a little bit further about this project. I have some questions about this. And maybe you two could create
mm,
those tasks and make sure that you're on the same page. There was a leadership class that I went through a few years ago, and each of us had a different role, and we had to make a decision about something. But we only had so much information. I was thinking about this last night when I was doing the dishes, and I was like, all of us walked away with a different ending. So unless those minutes are taken and like really written out and spelled out
mm,
like who's assigned, oftentimes we all think that someone else is doing it. And then we start to make assumptions that someone else is actually bringing the cookies or someone else is actually following through with that project until you get there. And then that's when the conflict really starts. It's like, oh my gosh, well, if Katie had just shown up on time, or if, Caitlin had just checked her emails more often, whatever it is, we start to assume that the other person's behavior is the reason for that conflict.
mm.
Another thought that I had with what you were sharing is that we are and still in very much an uncharted territory of these online meetings and conflict. You can look at research. Like you can go to Google Scholar and maybe just look up research articles about working in diverse teams or online environments and really start to hone in on what you're looking for. There are different types of leadership styles, which that could be another series. Authentic leadership is one that I really like, is leading more from that personality and more from a personable approach. Um, but it's also just trying on those different leadership hats that you need to use in the right situation.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions coming in. I have another one.
Okay.
Uh, how would you go about communicating that the meeting that is now a standing online meeting can be an email or a Teams chat or any ideas? You're a mid-career professional, you've navigated a lot of situations. How do we
Yeah.
get rid of the meetings we no longer need or no longer valuable?
Oh my goodness. I think that's something where it could be of, why are we meeting? And oftentimes I know that sometimes I've gone to meetings where I'm like, I think this is just a social hour. We're just getting together just to talk. And is there value in that? And there could be value in that. But there could be oftentimes with the online meetings, maybe you can focus in, maybe shorten our meetings a little bit, maybe shorten it down to 45 minutes instead of an hour, or do 25 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Like really see how much time you actually need, and maybe ask, what's our agenda for the items? Um, this is where I guess I'm trying to give you more like lead managing up techniques to kind of
Mhm.
leverage. Um, and that's when, if it gets to the point, go back to the leader and say, hey, how can we revisit this? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's like who has the authority. I was thinking of the models you shared, right?
Mhm,
And putting structure into place. So who has the authority over the meeting? But really starting with purpose, right? Going back to Priya Parker's work. What is the
mhm,
purpose? And clearly, when it's been determined, clearly stating that and maybe like checking in every time you're coming together, if it's monthly,
mhm,
like, here's our purpose. Are we still is this where we're still work we're doing? Is there still need to do this? Is there a better way we can be working together more efficient, etc.? But really
mhm,
like looking, I think, at the meeting structurally. And
mhm.
that's how my mind works. So
Right.
I recognize there are those people who need that emotional connection
Yeah.
to folks. So yeah, maybe having a handful of people kind of that have different personality types, different needs,
Mhm.
kind of having those conversations and um, yeah, but we are a minute past. I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop here. Caitlin, thank you so much for showing up in the midst of being a whole human with all sorts of things going on with your children and dogs. It's always a treat when we get to um, learn from you. So thank you for your time. Everyone, thanks for being here. Watch your email. We're going to ask for an evaluation. We want to know how we're doing. And we want to know what we should be focusing on when we come back together next fall or winter. So thank you all. We'll be in touch soon and good luck in those online meetings.
Thank you.
Right, we can stop recording. It's okay.